Fitz was lounged comfortably in the plush, red, upholstered train seat. He was enjoying the gentle rocking momentum of the train as they sailed along through the golden sunset of the afternoon. Despite being cold outside, to all appearances from inside the warm train, the day was superb. Fran was sitting next to him, her nose buried in a book, and Rin was quietly chattering with everyone, seated on his other side, where she could alternately talk with Fitz and run interference between Davy and Mary. The latter hadn't been necessary much yet, but it seemed uncomfortably like a recurring possibility. Mary had latched onto Davy, and while the casual observer merely saw two people yammering back and forth, Fitz felt more like he was watching a cat playing a mouse to death. Fitz had to admit, it seemed like Mary actually liked Davy, and he didn't think Rin's grandmother meant any real harm, but that tongue of hers was sharp, and more often than not, she seemed to unintentionally cut at Davy with it. Or Millie. He felt irritated on his friend's behalf, but amused himself by envisioning the old buzzard-eating crow later that evening. She was in for a surprise when Davy and Millie dropped their news, he smiled to himself. He felt bad for Rin, who was progressively becoming more unhappy. He liked Rin. Come to think of it, he liked Millie too. Fitz pretty much liked everyone, and while he was prepared to like Mary, it would have been easier if she'd quit picking on Davy, which did seem oddly accidental most of the time, and Millie. What irritated Fitz was that did not seem accidental. Fitz glanced across to the opposite row. Mary was currently explaining cheerfully to Davy that his scarf was lovely, but it was the wrong color for his face. Fitz had no idea how the yellow and gray swirled fabric could be the wrong color for anyone's face, but what did he know about fashion? He thought it looked fine. He yawned and stretched, jostling Fran by accident, who gave her brother a long, suffering look before returning to her book. Thinking better of it, she leaned in.
Hey, knucklehead.
How can I be of service, my kind, dear sister? He muttered sarcastically in an undertone.
You're keeping an eye on Rin, right? I know it's your grandma, but...
She might need a distraction. I got you. Don't worry. I'm looking out for her, Fitz muttered. If he saw Rin getting upset, he'd suggest coffee or a snack and drag her and Fran off for a bit to cool down before anything that could be said that she, Davy, or Millie might regret. Davy's getting along fine with her, he muttered to Fran. He's got a knack for handling her. Fran glanced across the small gap, then shook her head.
I don't know. He's smiling, but he doesn't look like he's having fun. It's like when he's dealing with difficult customers.
Mary was busy picking at Davy's glasses, lifting them off his nose.
Different frames might suit you better, darling. Make you more distinguished, less bookish. These make you look like an alley cat.
Davy smiled mechanically, and somewhat myopically at her, and thanked her, gently removing his glasses from her with a deft but polite motion, and pushing them firmly back on his face. She hadn't even noticed. She was on to the next topic. That's exactly what it looks like, Fitz exclaimed in a whisper. That or a lion tamer. Fran snorted. It caught Rin's attention.
Say,
she whispered, leaning in.
If I slid the window open and shoved Grandma out, you guys would pretend you didn't see anything, right?
Oh, laughed Fitz quietly and being magnanimous. She's not that bad. She just has strong opinions.
Yeah,
hissed Fran.
I can smell him from here.
It was Rin's turn to snort and snicker quietly. Sis, that's Rin's grandma, Fitz admonished.
She ain't my grandma,
Fran replied sardonically.
But I am sorry, Rin. I'm sure she... Well, no, I'm not. Poor Davy.
Mary had switched topics.
So, are you looking for anyone right now? She asked. At your age, you should probably stop playing around and settle down, or you're going to die alone, like old Otto Lashia. Remember him?
I do,
supplied Darryl grumpily.
Isn't he the old guy who went to the pub every day with all his friends? Over 400 people showed up at his funeral.
Let's not talk about funerals, darling.
Mary changed the subject, thwarted.
The point is, Davy needs to get his life together, or he's going to wind up just like Millie.
Everyone's ears pricked up. Darryl and Davy both exchanged sharp looks, as did Rin and Fran. Fitz shifted a bit, irritably. This was starting to get on his nerves. He nudged Rin and leaned into her, in a show of comfort and solidarity. She leaned into him, but kept her eyes fixed across the gap, narrowed and attentive.
I don't know why you've always hung around that daughter of mine, but I'm glad you do. She needs a friend. Poor thing just never got her life together.
She seems to be doing all right to me, countered Davy in a manner that only Marilyn mistook as cheerfully. Successful restaurant, lovely daughter, seems happy. At least when I've been spending time with her.